This video is sponsored by the Assorted nodes from the Unearthly Archive Kickstarter. Hi there, I'm the _twig and I like analysing game rules. One of my absolute favourite spells in 5e 2014 is Armor of Agathys, so okay, what's going on there?
Cats! What's going on with that light? Alec, get up there and get it fixed.
Looks like we're doing another take then. How many's it been now?
Oh, shut up, Mike. By the way, your boom was in short.
It'll be fine. Eddie can take it out in post.
Oh, don't put more work on Eddie, Mike. He's got enough as it is. Hang on, are you on your phone in the middle of filming? That's why your bloody boom was in short.
Oh, don't worry, Cam. It's fine. I'm just looking at the assorted notes from the Unearthly Archive Kickstarter.
What's that?
Look, come over here, Cam. It's a new 5e homebrew book with subclasses, magic items, spells, and NPC stat blocks. It's got stuff like the Gun Mage Wizard, who can shoot spells at their foes to turn a saving throw into an attack roll, or the Oath of the Harvest Paladin, which can give its allies temp HP and resistance to cold when they eat a meal together.
You know what? Some of these firearms do actually seem pretty cool for an industrial or Wild West themed campaign. They aren't quite as overwhelmingly powerful as the ones in the DMG, but that devastating property means that they'll be doing a bunch more damage on a critical hit.
Yeah, and it's got loads of NPCs who all have a stat block for each tier of play, meaning that your DM can have them progress along with the party.
It says here that it got to 2/3 of its goal on its first day. That's pretty freaking good for a first time self-publisher.
Yep. I'll send you a link, Cam, and also get Rita to sneak it into the description in case anyone at home wants to back it.
You do know that this chat gets cut, right, Mike? It's part of why Eddie is so overworked. Wait, hang on, looks like Alec fixed the light.
Take 18. Action!
Hi there, I'm the _twig and I like analysing game rules. One of my absolute favourite spells in 5e 2014 is Armor of Agathys. It's a super simple spell, but it gives you a few really fun paths to go down when making a build or playing a character. It's a first level spell which gives you 5 temp HP, and if you get hit by a melee attack whilst you have that temp HP, the enemy takes 5 cold damage. I'll be calling that damage spike damage, because it's a bit like punching a wall of spikes. You will hurt yourself too. Where it gets really interesting though is when you upcast it. Both the temp HP and the spike damage increase by 5 for each spell slot level. That means that the most effective way to use it is to find options which cause you to take hits but reduce damage so that your temp HP lasts longer, and as such, the spell can spike on more attacks. Probably the most effective way of doing this is with the Abjurer, whose arcane ward allows you to protect your temp HP people entirely. But that's not the approach that I want to take today, because it's not so great at the other thing that Armor of Agathys really encourages. AOA wants you to be a tank. It wants you to force enemies to attack you rather than your allies. This is a fairly hard thing to do in 5e, because there's very few ways to restrict enemy targets. But the best one is probably just area denial. That is, preventing enemies from moving freely and choosing who they want to target. This build is doing exactly that. Welcome to The Beast, an Armor of Agathys control grappler. Backtracking slightly though, as I mentioned, Armor of Agathys does cold damage, which is almost as cool as my Patreon supporters. They help me to make these videos, and get to see them early. With the NDA on the 2024 PHP lifting in just over a week, there's going to be a lot of discussion between us, trying to collate as much information as we can. If you want to see what we can dig up, or help us do the digging, why not join us? My buddy SK has set up a shovel shop, and will happily sell you whatever you need to sift through the sediment and find some gold. Right, one last thing. Why am I doing this build now when there's the 2024 rules coming out in just a few months? It's because I want to do this build again in 2024. Assuming that there's no major changes to Armor of Agathys, I have a really good idea for how I could get this build to work, and I thought it would be fun to compare the two. So, with that said, let's actually see the build. So, we're starting off with our race. The beast is going to be a Mark of Warding Dwarf. This is one of the Eberron Dragonmarked races, and unfortunately it's almost compulsory for this build. They get all of the basic dwarf features like 25 speed, some proficiencies, and very importantly a resistance to poison damage, which can help protect our Armor of Agathys temp HP when fighting giant spiders or whatever, but they also get to add a 1d4 to any investigation or thieves tools checks, cast Alarm, Mage Armor and Arcane Lock once per day, and most importantly of all, they get an expanded spell list which gets added to your class list, and one of these spells is Armor of Agathys. This means that we don't need to dip into Warlock or Clockwork or whatever to get it, which saves us at least one level. As for our stats, maxing strength at 17, charisma is the secondary at 16, then get enough constitution to be comfortable at 14, and finally throw the other 2 points in dex for slightly better initiative and saves. You could put these in Wiz if you wanted. Our first level is then going to be Fighter. This is pretty much exclusively for heavy armour, because we'll need that later on. But con saves and second wind are also nice, and having action surge at 2 means that it is definitely a better option than the Paladin. Now for the fighting style, I've picked Defense. This is technically anti-synergy with Armor of Agathys, because we want to get hit, but actually I found that in practice not getting hit at all is still better than getting hit and then doing spike damage. We have tactics later on which can make it easier for enemies to hit us if we want to. Something like Superior Technique, Dueling, or Unarmed Fighting would also be a reasonable choice though. Right now we probably just want to run at the enemy and hit them with our pointy stick. By the way, I'm not going to be doing damage calcs for this build, because frankly, AoE is impossible to calc for. The assumptions that you have to make for it are so extreme that it's frankly kind of meaningless. After the first level fighter dip though, we're going into the build's main class, Bard. Bard is probably the best grappler in the game when built correctly, and they also have some really good damage reduction options. We are of course getting Armor of Agathys immediately, although it's probably not actually worth casting yet, as well as Blade Ward, which is better than dodging on an Armor of Agathys build, because it preserves temp HP whilst doing full spike damage. Other than those, we'll pick up the standard Bard suite of Minor Illusion, Fairy Fire, Healing Word, and Sleep. At third level, we get Jack of all trades, which bumps initiative, meaning that we are slightly more likely to get a grapple or whatever before they move. I'm also grabbing Speak with Animals because it's cool and really useful as a ritual. We could get Longstrider or Silvery Barbs, but Speak is more fun and I frankly just don't want to take Barbs. I don't particularly like it as a spell. Fourth level is where we get exciting though. First up, second level slots means that Armor of Agathys is now at 10 on temp HP and spike damage. We've also gone into Lore Bard for Cutting Words, which lets us reduce the damage from one attack by a roll of our Bardic Inspiration die, currently a d6. I think that that's good enough for us to start using AoE, so let's explain how we're going to be using it. AoE has a 1 hour duration, so we're going to be casting it before combat when possible. We'll then run up and attempt to grapple. And now that we have expertise in athletics for a +7, this should be fairly easy. If we then drag the enemy away from our allies, they will only be able to attack us, and we can then use Cutting Words to reduce any damage that they do. Given that we now have 18 AC, I reckon that the beast can probably eat about 3 to 5 attacks, and do 20 to 30 spike damage per casting of Armor of Agathys. They can actually eat even more actions if the enemies make grapple escape attempts. To help us along, we're also picking up Enlarge Reduce, which can give the beast advantage on their grapples and allow them to grapple huge creatures, and Suggestion just because it's a really good team support option. We're going to be dropping Sleep for that. By the way, if we actually want to get hit, then we can close our eyes. This gives the enemy advantage to hit us, somewhat offsetting the high AC. Closed-eyed Blade Ward is a very legitimate turn in this build. We can also deliberately proc opportunity attacks to force more hits and more spike damage. At 5th level we get our first feat, which will be Heavy Armor Master. This increases strength, putting us up to +10 athletics thanks to the proficiency bump, but more importantly it gives us a flat damage reduction of 3 on every single instance of bludgeoning, piercing and slashing damage from non-magical attacks. I think a lot of people don't really appreciate just how good that is. Most monsters scale based on the number of attacks in their multi-attack action rather than the actual damage per attack. Let's say that we're fighting a Bulgura, a CR5 monster. They do 2 fists and a bite for an expected 29 damage if they all hit, but heavily armoured reduces that by 9, just over 31%. Of course, with only 45% chance to hit our 19 AC thanks to an assumed upgrade to plate, the actual effect is that the 14.4 mean damage becomes 10.35, meaning that a Cutting Word is guaranteed to make the Armor of Agathys stick. If we also use Blade Ward, then the Bulgura is actually only doing 4.84 damage on the average turn, before Cutting Words, so it will be absolutely eating its attacks. Also at this level, I'll pick up Silence, because Silence plus Grapple is a really good caster shutdown, and also Vicious Mockery, just because sometimes we want to give a disadvantage or we might need a ranged option. 6th level, we get a Bardic Inspiration bump to D8, meaning better cutting words, and Font of Inspiration, meaning more cutting words. On spells, I'm picking up Mass Cure Wounds and also dropping Fairy Fire for Fear. We could also use Armor of Agathys 15 now, but Fear is so good that I would probably recommend sticking with AoE 10. Because Fear forces enemies to take the dash action, and then doesn't allow a save unless they can't see us, Fear plus Grapple is actually a full shutdown. The enemy that we're grappling will never be able to do anything until either the concentration or the grapple is broken. Unless of course they have a bonus action like Misty Step, but that's why we have Silence. Fear, Silence and Grapples lets us actually just straight up take enemies out of the fight, although there is a bit of action clog. Fortunately, we can address that at level 7 by going for a 2nd level of Fighter. Action Surge will let us grapple and cast a spell on the same turn, or get up Armor of Agathys if we got jumped by an unexpected combat. Or just do 2 grapples. The order of operations is very important here though. If we are using the Fear lockdown, then we should cast first, see who fails the save, and then Action Surge grapple whoever failed it. If we're going for the Silence lock though, then it doesn't have a save, so securing the grapple first, then Action Surging for Silence is better. We might also need to grapple a huge creature, in which case we should use Enlarge and then Action Surge grapple, and Action Surge in general just opens up a ton of other options. Because of that, I do think that it's worth the level investment, and I don't mind putting Bard off by 1 extra level. Going back to Bard though, at level 8 we get additional magical secrets. First up, from the actual Bard spell that we get at this level, I'm getting the ever reliable Dispel Magic. Magical secrets is more exciting though. I think that there are probably 4 main options. Summon Undead has the skeleton form for a ranged option, which we're kind of lacking right now, as well as the putrid form for that poison and paralysis. Then Vortex Warp is really good team mobility. I think that ultimately though, the winners are Spirit Guardians and Fine Steed. Spirit Guardians is just always reliable, especially when we're grappling anyways, but the king here is Fine Steed. When you cast a self-target spell whilst riding your steed, it copies the spell. That means that every time we cast Armor of Agathys, which I think we can now reasonably cast at 3rd level for 15 Temps and Spike, we actually get double the value. It also copies Enlarge, Spirit Guardians, and Blade Ward, and we could cast our once per day free Mage Armor from Mark of Warding for a +3 AC, up to 14 assuming it's a Warhorse. It can also act as a pseudo slightly crappy Vortex Warp by ferrying our allies around the battlefield. So, how are we going to run this? Well, we'll start our combat mounted with Armor of Agathys on both us and the steed. We'll then ride up, cast our concentration spell, dismount, and then grapple. The horse can then dash back to the party, deliberately proccing an opportunity attack for some AoE spike damage, and then it can get ready for someone else to mount it. It could also just act as another body on the field, just doing a bit more damage. Going up to 9th level now, it brings us 4th level spells, and that means Polymorph. This gives us access to the T-Rex and the Giant Ape, which both allow the beast to grapple gargantuan creatures like a proper kaiju. Or we could cast it on somebody else just for damage. If we do decide to self-cast though, Polymorph will also copy onto the Warhorse, who can then be turned into either a black bear or an ape if we need a bit more damage, or into a giant dragonfly if we need a flying mount. Polymorph is ultimately less useful than 3rd level spells though, so unless we're expecting to fight a gargantuan creature, we can probably start upcasting AoE to 4th level for 20 Temps and Spike, still copied onto the steed. Now then, 10th level gives us a new spell, which will be Dimension Door just because it's a nice teleport, then an ASI. There are a few options here. Bumping strength to 20 will make grapples better, but we're already at +12. Warcaster protects concentration, but we already have +6 and some damage reduction. It does mean hand-free casting, which is nice, but that's only really useful on a few spells, with the most important ones being Blade Ward and Dispel. I think that if we were looking at this as just a 20th level build, something like a Charisma half feat, maybe Telekinetic or Fey Touched would be good, but right now I think I'd rather just go for +2 Charisma. Currently the save DCs on our spells are 2 behind curve, and this also gives us an extra Bardic Inspiration every short rest. At 11th level we get a 5th level slot. We don't really need Enlarge anymore now that we have Polymorph, so I'll swap it out for Mass Cure Wounds and also get Raise Dead. These are fairly standard keep the party alive spells. Okay, 12th level. That brings us to Magical Secrets again. One of the choices here is honestly a no-brainer. Find Greater Steed can replace Find Steed. This gives us the Pegasus, which has 90-foot fly speed, 15 AC after Mage Armor, and is just all around better. As it's CR2, it also gets better polymorphs, mainly the Giant Elk, Giant Constrictor Snake, and the Quetzalcoatlus, which is huge and has Flyby. Since I'm dropping basic Find Steed, I'll swap it out for Synaptic Static, which is a good blast option with a great rider. As for the other spell, Wall of Force. The entire reason we're grappling is for area denial, and there's not much that's better at area denial than Wall of Force. If you want something more on theme though, Fire Shield gives us another resistance, more spike damage, and can be copied onto the Pegasus. We also now have 2 5th level slots, and as such, I think I'm comfortable using one of them on Armor of Agathys 25, again copied onto the Pegasus. That's probably going to be as high as we go on this build outside of special occasions, at least until we get to 8th level slots. 13th level brings us 6th level spells. Mass Suggestion is such an immense upgrade from Suggestion that it's not even funny. By the way, we analysed some of the screenshots in the art video, and it looks like Mass Suggestion probably hasn't been nerfed in 2024. It still probably doesn't have concentration. We're also going to get Major Image, which can be cast at 6th level to make it permanent, which is pretty cool and actually really useful in some circumstances. At 14th we grab another ASI, and I'm just going to be putting it on +2 Charisma again, to max out our save DC and get the full 5 uses of Bardic Inspiration. 15th level is the really obvious pick of Force Cage as a direct upgrade to Wall of Force, and then 16th level gives us the next set of Magical Secrets. Simulacrum is fairly obvious, it's an insanely good spell, and I think that it also copies onto the Pegasus if we cast it on ourselves whilst riding it. So now we have 2 flying ponies. The other one here is a bit more fun. Draconic Transformation is a really strong bonus action which gives us a fly speed, blind sight, and a bonus action breath weapon. And it also copies onto the Pegasus. This represents 12d8 AoE every single turn as a bonus action. Absolutely nuts as a damage option. Since we're grappling, we can also do fun fly up and drop strategies as well. At this level, Lawbard also gives us Peerless Skill, which is fine. If we think that we're going to fail a grapple with our +14, then hopefully Peerless Skill will lock that in. We only have a few levels left now, so for 17 I'll be grabbing Antipathy Sympathy. Antipathy is basically the Fear grapple lock, except it's always on, and then Sympathy can be used to force enemies to come towards the beast rather than their allies, which is another effective area denial feature. It lasts for 10 days, which means that we have a free 8th level slot to upcast Armor of Agathys to 40 temp HP and spike damage. The only other thing that this slot could be used on is a second Draconic Transformation, which might be okay. At 18th level, we get our last ASI. I don't think that there's anything that directly adds to the build, so I'll probably just stick with Alert, putting our initiative up to +8, meaning that we're very likely to go first and get down a grapple or control spell before the enemies can respond. 19th level then gives us a 9th level slot, which will go on True Polymorph. As always, self-casting copies onto the Pegasus. There's actually a direct upgrade called the Glass Pegasus from While Beyond the Witchlight, which gives it some condition immunities and turns it into a construct. Other options are the Were-Rat, which is immune to bludgeoning, piercing and slashing from non-magical attacks, the Horncaller, which has conjure animals and can give them reaction attacks, and there's quite a few other nice spellcasters. Finally, 20th level, we get 2 more magical secrets which can go on Wish, because it's Wish, and Mass Heal, just in case it's ever necessary. And there's our build. Area Denial Armor of Agathys, designed to eat actions and deal spike damage in return. The beast kind of reminds me of Zugzwang, a position in chess where every legal move is a bad one. As I said at the beginning, assuming that there's no major changes to Armor of Agathys, I'm probably going to try and redo this build when the 2024 PHB is released, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss that. If you enjoyed the build, why not also send it to a friend? They might enjoy it too. Bye!